Good morning, everyone. Thanks to everyone who's here at the Sawyer Building in Las Vegas, up at the Legislative Building in Carson City, appearing on Zoom or connected via the internet or phone. I want to call to order first meeting this interim of the Interim Standing Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Ms. Hoffaker, please call the roll.
Senator Daly?
Here.
Senator Gansert?
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman?
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Here.
Assemblyman Hibbets?
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller? Assemblywoman Mosca?
Here.
Chair Orenshaw?
Present. Thank you very much, Ms. Hoffaker. Next, I would like to introduce our Legislative Council Bureau staff who will be assisting us on this committee during the interim. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Haley Prohl and Director Nicholas Anthony from the Research Division who will be serving as our committee policy analysts. They will be helping us with background information on and research into the issues that come before this committee. Additionally, we've got Heidi Clarkson, Tara Zimmerman, and Asher Killian from the LCB Legal Division who will be serving as our committee counsels. Chaimari Mangoba from the Fiscal Analysis Division will be serving as our fiscal analyst. Bonnie Hoffaker, our committee secretary, also from the Research Division. Additionally, we receive assistance from Broadcast and Production Services staff, and we appreciate all the help from our LCB staff in Southern Nevada, up in Carson City, to make this happen and to be able to broadcast across the state and on the internet. Before we begin, I'd like to make several housekeeping announcements. Members who are joining us virtually, please be sure to keep your video on so that we know we have a quorum. Please also be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. Agenda items may be taken in a different order than listed on the agenda. Two or more agenda items may be combined for consideration. An item may be removed from this agenda, or discussion of an item on this agenda may be delayed at any time. Meeting materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage, located on the Nevada Legislature's website. You can also sign up for electronic notifications related to the committee's activities on the legislature's website. We will have a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Members of the public may also provide testimony in different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. To call in for public comment on the phone, please dial this phone number, 888-475-4499. Again, I'll repeat that. It's 888-475-4499. When prompted for a meeting ID, enter 881-0730-8495 and press pound. That meeting ID again is 881-0730-8495. Then you press the pound key. And then there'll be instructions to guide you how to participate in public comment. If you would like to provide written comments, please submit them electronically during or after the meeting by email, and the email address is LOE Interim, INTERIM, the @ lcb.state.nv.us, or you can mail your comments, your written comments, to the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada 89701. Additionally, you can fax comments to the following fax number, 775-684-6400. Finally, I would like to remind members of the public who are here at the Sawyer Building in Las Vegas or up at the Legislative Building in Carson City to please silence your electronic devices, especially cell phones and laptops, during the meeting. Some of the issues that we deal with here on the Interim Standing Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections can be contentious, but I have to ask everyone to show respect for all speakers at all times, even if you don't agree with something they say or with their position. With that, we will now move on. Oh, and one more reminder to members who are on Zoom or up in Carson City, I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions they have. If I miss a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or even to turn on your microphone and let me know if I've missed your question, because I don't want to miss any members' questions who are on Zoom or up in Carson City. And down here in Southern Nevada, please, if I miss a question, please raise your hand or let me know that you have a question to ask. With that, I'd like to go to agenda item number 2, public comment. This is the first public comment section for today. There will be an additional opportunity to make public comment at the end of the meeting. Anyone who wishes to make public comment, please remember to state your name for the record, and we are asking that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. Staff will time each speaker during public comment to ensure that everyone has an equal and fair opportunity to speak and make public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment here at the Sawyer Building in Las Vegas? I'm not seeing anyone coming up here in Las Vegas. Up in Carson City, is there anyone who wishes to make public comment?
There are none.
I'm not seeing Senator Daley?
There's no public comment in person in Carson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Daley. Broadcast, is there anyone on the phone lines who wishes to provide public comment?
Yes, Chair. If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. This is Oscar Williams from Reno. I provided some written comments. I would like to read those comments for everyone now. Dear Chair and members of the Legislative Operations and Elections Committee, Cisco Aguilar's actions leading up into including the PPP implementation of the VREMS project have been wanton and reckless, resulting in a national embarrassment. Everyone now knows voters who opted out of mail ballots and those who did not vote are reported as having their mail ballot counted on the SOS website, causing the SOS to make a public announcement to explain their mistake. Responsibility rests solely on Mr. Aguilar, not the counties as he would like us to believe. My trust in elections in Nevada have diminished greatly as a result of Mr. Aguilar's actions. Mr. Mark Balashi, before the Standing Interim Legislative Operations Committee, April 1, 2022, said, you may remember this, some of you members, quote, it does not appear that we'll be able to effectively implement the top-down voter registration prior to January of 2024. But with the intent is not do it quickly, but do it properly. So as it currently stands, I estimate prior to January 2026. He goes on to say the following, quote, the public perception, again, while very important, the goal is to make sure that it's done right. Our electorate deserves it to be done right first. However, in March 2023, Mr. Aguilar announced his $30 million push for the VREMS project. Sent Mr. Aguilar a letter in June 2023 and said, your rush to get the VREMS project online in time for 2024 is nothing short of reckless and goes against the advice of your staff. I wrote that because I believe Nevada should not be a technological proving ground for elections, lest we not forget the automatic voter registration glitch that has persisted since its 2020 implementation. The AVR glitch flips party affiliation to non-party without voter knowledge or consent. Non-party has ballooned as a demographic as a result. I understand there will be a presentation later. I can't wait to hear it. There are other factors too, including
Mr. Williams, thank you very much. Mr. Williams, I'm sorry you're at your 2 minutes. I appreciate your public comment. We do have your written submission. Thank you very much. Broadcast, is there anyone else wishing to make public comment?
Yes, Chair. One moment.
Good morning. My name is Ellen Gifford. The recent data corruption in Nevada's voter history has made me very concerned, and I dare say concerns many Nevada voters. To add to the concern, an article in the Nevada Independent said that a Nevada Secretary of State spokeswoman, Cecilia Heston, said that vote history is generated separately from election results, and the results on the state's election website and county canvases of the votes are unaffected and accurate. When I read this, my immediate thought was that this is not a logical statement. I had to wonder if the public was simply being dismissed as unintelligent and naive. I suspect I was not alone in my reaction to that statement. Nevada voters are not unintelligent and they are not naive, and they have the right to information regarding the system that processes their vote once they submit it. I am making a request that the Nevada Secretary of State provide Nevada citizens with a clear narrative on what happens to our vote once it is received, how it is recorded, and what types of files or databases contain that record of our vote. I further request that we not be sent to the Nevada statutes for this information. A simple yet clearly informative diagram on the Secretary of State's website would be perfect. This is public information, and it should not be difficult and take very little time if the voting system being used is properly documented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gifford. Broadcasting, is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment?
Sheriff, there are no other callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And again, we will have a public comment period at the end of the meeting as well, if anyone did not get a chance to make public comment right now. With that, I would like to go on to agenda item number 3, overview of the committee's duties and responsibilities. And we have Haley Prohl, Senior Policy Analyst, GIS Specialist, the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, my name is Haley Prohl, and I am a Senior Policy Analyst with the Research Division of the LCB. I'm honored to serve as the lead policy analyst for this committee this interim. As nonpartisan staff of the Legislative Council Bureau, I can neither advocate for nor against any of the proposals that come before you. My role is to assist the committee as a whole and each of you as individual legislators, while also providing policy and research needs to help you make informed decisions about the issues reviewed and studied by the committee. This morning, I will be going over the committee's duties and responsibilities, which are outlined in the committee brief that is included in your meeting packet today and also available online on the committee's meeting page. In addition to the committee's duties and responsibilities, the brief also includes information about the committee's membership and meeting dates, past committee action, relevant reports and publications, and staff contact information. Note that the meeting dates for the committee this interim have been set. After today, the committee will plan to meet on March 22nd, April 19th, May 10th, and August 9th. The final meeting on August 9th will include a work session where the committee will consider its bill draft request for the 2025 legislative session. This committee has jurisdiction over the same issues that fall under the purview of the Senate and Assembly standing committees on legislative operations and elections, and in addition has jurisdiction over issues relating to governmental purchasing as mandated by Nevada Revised Statutes 332.215. The committee may request up to 10 bill draft requests for the 2025 legislative session that address issues related to legislative operations and elections. Additionally, the committee may vote to direct staff to draft letters to relevant stakeholders and to include policy statements in the final committee report, which is drafted by staff after the work of this committee concludes. Again, the committee will consider these actions during the work session at its final meeting. The committee brief also includes information about the committee's past actions. At the conclusion of the previous interim, the committee approved 4 recommendations for BDRs and sent letters to various stakeholders relating to the use of voting machines and tribal ID cards in elections. For a complete summary of the committee's activities and recommendations from the last interim, Bulletin 23-9 is available on the LCB's website. I would also like to briefly mention the relevant reports and publications that may be of interest to this committee. These include publications and reports produced by the Legislative Council Bureau and those mandated by statute. Pursuant to NRS 332.215, the Commission to Study Governmental Purchasing must submit a written report to this committee by July 1 regarding any recommendations of the Commission for legislation relating to governmental purchasing. And hopefully the committee will be hearing from the Commission later this interim. Additionally, in the brief, you will find a link to all reports that must be submitted to the legislature if you would like to dig deeper into certain issues. The Research Division of the LCB prepares publications on many major policy areas, including legislative operations and elections, and to date has published a few publications relating to the 2024 election cycle. These and more can be found through the link to the division's research content page in the brief. And finally, the committee brief includes a list of the Legislative Council Bureau staff who will provide support to the committee this interim. Please feel free to contact us at any time with questions relating to the committee. In addition, the Research Division is available to provide information and assistance on a confidential basis to individual members of the legislature on any topic. Chair Orenshaw, this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prohl. Members, any questions for Ms. Prohl, our Principal Policy Analyst? Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions down in Southern Nevada. Don't see any hands raised in Carson City or for our members on Zoom. So with that, I will move on to agenda item number 4. We are very fortunate today to have our Secretary of State, Cisco Aguilar, and his deputies. And we also have representatives from our offices of Nevada's county's clerks and registrars and voters for a review of our 2024 presidential preference primary election. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Deputies.
Good morning, Chair Orenshaw, Vice Chair Mosca, and other members of the committee. Thank you very much for having us. For the record, I'm Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar. I am joined today by Chief Deputy Gabriel DeCara and Deputy Secretary Mark Velashin. We also have a number of county clerks who will be presenting to you later on. Before we dive into the presentation, I would like to address the issues that came up this weekend. There was a miscommunication between statewide voter registration database and files that came from the counties. I want to be clear. At no point was any data inaccurate at the state or county level. The only inaccuracy was with the message that was presented to the voter when they checked their vote history on the state website. The matter had nothing to do with vote tabulation or election results in any way. That being said, I am the Chief Officer of Elections for the state of Nevada. The buck stops with me. This morning, my office issued a release on my behalf apologizing to the Nevada voters. It includes a memo written by my staff detailing the technical reasons behind the matter. Nevada's elections have always been secure, fair, and accessible under secretaries of both parties. I am proud to work alongside the county clerks and registrars to keep that legacy going. Now, Deputy Velashin will provide a report on the presidential preference primary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Deputy Velashin, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Mark Velashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. I do have a presentation that we provided to the committee. If I may take a quick moment to pull it up.
Certainly, please go ahead.
Apologize for the delay, Mr. Chair. Is the committee able to see the presentation?
You know, I was able to see it just a second ago, and now there it is. In Carson City, are you able to see it, or do you have the handout? I think you can follow along on the handout too, and on Zoom if there's an issue. But hopefully, you're able to.
Yeah, it's on the screen.
It's on. Thank you.
And I have the handout. So.
Thank you, Senator Daly.
We can see it
Pardon-
online.
You can. Thank you, Senator Seavers-Scancer. Please proceed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Mark Volashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections for the record. So I'm going to provide an overview of the results of the presidential preference primary for the committee, highlighting a number of key elements. The agenda, relatively small, in part because we're hoping to get to questions, so that if the members have interest in any element of the election, we can highlight that specifically. To start with, though, to frame the election, I do want to highlight the voter registration statistics. There's really two elements from the chart on slide 3 that I want to point out. First and foremost, in the bottom right, the number of total registered voters in our state still continues to exceed 1.9 million. That was a trend that we identified and anticipated sustaining above 1.9 million active registered voters, and that trend has proven to be true. We are on a glide slope to approach 2 million registered voters sometimes in next biennium, is what we anticipate, at least initially. More specific to the presidential preference primary, though, I do want to highlight again that we really focused the voter turnout stats and the vast preponderance of this presentation on the number of Democratic and Republican registered voters, which are again the second and third columns from the left. Of note, just to save you the math, we provided there the total as of February 1st, which was 1.1 million registered voters that were aligned with either the Democratic or Republican parties. And then I also included the update, the snapshot taken the morning of Election Day on February 6th, so that you can see the slightly increase that we had on Election Day. I do want to highlight, when we talk about voter registration statistics, that there are two main methods that continue to benefit voters and enable them to register and update their party affiliations. The first is through our online portal. We've included on the top of this slide the numbers of online registrants, as well as the updates that have occurred over the last roughly calendar year. Also, the automatic voter registration process, again, also an extremely effective manner of registering eligible Nevada citizens to vote, as well as informing clerks and registrars about applicable updates to the voter registrations as well. Those two processes, the online voter registration element as well as the automatic voter registration process, continue to benefit voters as we prepare for any upcoming election cycle. Voter turnout on slide 5 indicates first the statewide cumulative votes cast as well as the overall turnout. For those of you that are maybe faster with your math than I was, I do want to highlight the fact that if you add up the totals of the votes cast at the top, as well as the total turnout, you will notice that there's a 1,406 vote discrepancy. That is deliberate. There were 1,406 voters who either cast an overvote or an undervote. We had a number of individuals of those 1,406 who did not fill in a circle in the designated space, but instead wrote things on the ballot and then submitted it. Under Nevada revised statute, that essentially becomes an undervote, a blank ballot, though the voter does get vote history. So that counts as a vote cast, albeit a blank undervote. Similarly, if there's a line in more than one designated circle under our statutes, that is counted as an overvote. So saying that an individual filled in a circle for one candidate and then wrote perhaps a love note or something like that along the bottom to their county election official, if it went into that open space, that would count as an overvote, and those votes would not be counted either. That resulted in the 1,406 discrepancy between the turnout and the actual number of ballots cast.
Chief Deputy Gabriel DeCara, for the record. I believe the committee requested information on how turnout with the state's first ever presidential preference primary compared to the party-run caucuses in previous years. Again, the state has no affiliation with the parties or their caucus process. We can't speak to their methods of checking voters in and how vote totals were captured, et cetera. But based on publicly available information on Wikipedia, which is sometimes a productive source of information, the 2016 Republican caucus appeared to have just over 75,000 participants, and the 2020 Democratic caucus had just over 101,000 participants. And so we believe that we see increased participation in the state presidential preference primary. But again, none of those numbers are official, and the state is unaffiliated with the caucus process.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, unless you want me to open up for questions now, or please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. We're about halfway done.
Oh, thank you.
The other element on slide 5 that I would like to highlight is the vast percentage, or the higher percentage rather, of mail turnout. Again, indicating that our voters, when provided a mail ballot in their hands, it gives them the opportunity to research or again take part in this civic process. And you can see that 78% of the votes cast during the president's preference primary were done by mail, clarifying that that isn't necessarily receive the mail ballot and put it back into the mail. That could have included, or it does rather include, bringing that mail ballot back to the county election official and delivering it to an official drop box. Looking more specifically at the results on slides 6 and 7, you can see the results of the Democratic President's Preference Primary, again, their ballot, and then also followed by the Republican Party on the following slide. The incumbent president, President Joseph R. Biden Jr., did receive the most votes cast. And on slide 7, again, in this case, none of these candidates received the most votes, followed by Ms. Nikki Haley. Of note, the numbers that were presented on both of these slides have been put onto letters that are going to be delivered to the chairs of the two major parties, respectively.
Mark, if I may, Gabriel DeCara, for the record. We were pleasantly surprised that the numbers of candidates participating in Nevada's presidential preference primary were so small. At present, there is no filing fee to run for president and get your name on the ballot in Nevada. Our office did introduce some legislation that would have added a filing fee commensurate with the fee to run for Senate or Congress. That did not move forward, I believe, potentially because it would have made the bill a 2/3 bill, which I know can be a difficult hill to climb. However, if an extensive number of individuals were to decide that they wanted to run for President of the United States in the state of Nevada, and that ballot extended to 2 or 3 pages, that would increase the costs to the state and the counties potentially exponentially. And so we would ask the committee to consider potentially adding that filing fee in advance of the next presidential preference primary.
Mark Voloshin for the record. Moving to slide 8, I do want to highlight also the success of the effective absentee system for elections system. The E system it was initially developed to support military and overseas voters covered by the Uniform and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act. It has been expanded under Nevada law to encompass other covered voters, and I wanted to provide those statistics today so that you can see as well. Again, considering it was a closed primary for only essentially 2/3 of our electorate, again, this is a significant increase percentage-wise to the number of E's ballots cast. I will say that this process continues to inform our outreach efforts as well. We certainly have been working closely through our tribal liaison, both our chief deputy as well as we have a newly hired tribal liaison to increase outreach and education about this process and its availability with the intent of getting the 0 on the bottom bullet there to increase significantly. Again, ultimately, it's simply another opportunity for a voter to cast a vote in the manner of their choosing on top of 2 weeks of early voting. It was 1 week for the president's preference primary, 12 hours on election day, or via mail ballot. Same day registration, again, another opportunity for voters to update or register for the first time. I wanted to include some statistics so the committee was able to see that, again, this process also continues. The overall numbers, again, reflect the approximate participation by the parties, but this process is, again, alive and well, something that we continue to get word out about so that as more and more folks make the excellent decision to move to Nevada from the other states that they come from, we want them to be aware that up to Election Day and the close of polls, they're able to register to vote and cast their ballot appropriately. Signature curing on slide 10. This is also an important part of the voter turnout process and something that we continue to focus our outreach efforts on too. Many voters, again, aren't aware that there's a security process that goes into the review of their signature on the back of their mail ballot envelope. And when that that signature does not match what is on file at the county, the clerks and registrars do reach out to those individuals to ask them to correct, notify, or cure the signature. That process, you can see how many mail ballots were stopped as being having questionable signatures, with a little bit more than 50%, 54% actually being cured successfully. This reflects, I think, in part, the significant effort that our county election officials make to reach out to voters to try to get in touch with them. A great number of voters have decreased the information on their voter records, removing their phone numbers and emails out of a concern that they would receive marketing mail and those sorts of things and phone notifications. And when they do that, it reduces the registrar and clerk's abilities to contact them to just their mailing address, which can be problematic and challenging. So again, there's an outreach effort in place across the state that will continue informing voters of the importance of this process. That dropping off your mail ballot is not necessarily the end of the process, and if there is a security question relating to your signature, that your county election officials will be reaching out. Awareness of that is an important part of this process. On slide 11, I want to highlight on slides 11 and 12, again, the number of polling locations and poll workers. During the presidential preference primary, it was about half of what we will see in June and November in the upcoming election cycles. Again, still making a point deliberately, and this is something that we collectively scrutinize to make sure that the electorate was supported. We were not arbitrarily reducing polling locations, but making sure, again, that contracts were in place to support the needs of the voters across our states and population centers. The number of poll workers, again, slightly below what you would see, in some cases as low as half of the number of poll workers required for the presidential preference primary, in part given the turnout and the 1 week of early voting as opposed to the 2 weeks we'll see during the June and November election cycles. Again, also a challenge. That's a following agenda item, though, so I won't spend time talking about those challenges or how the counties will address that. You'll be hearing from the clerks and registrars themselves momentarily. Voter assistance and trends. When we talk about voter assistance and trends in the elections division, we're talking about contacts made with the public through emails, through phone calls. You can see since the beginning of the year, again, there's been a significant amount of questions that have come up. We use those questions, we log them and track them specifically so that we can identify outreach and education opportunities. If there's a bunch of questions about a certain topic, we may put out a press release, for example. The subject of the question is primarily related to the presidential preference primary. I do want to highlight that, again, that the 2-week judicial filing period was in early January, so there were questions relating to campaign finance, candidate filing, and other questions relating to the remainder of the election cycle. But there were a lot of questions otherwise about voting locations, the candidates who were or were not on the ballot, and other things relating to the caucus process. After discussing it with the party, the Republican Party, they asked that we direct all questions to them about the parties, or about the caucus rather. So we continue to do that at the state and county level to make sure that the voters got that party-specific information directly from the source. Lastly, I do want to touch on, again, something that we are focusing pretty heavily on for this year as well, voter outreach and education. We talked about how we gather that information on the previous slide through phone calls and emails. This slide highlights the number of ways that we are going to use that information to benefit the electorate. A number of outreach organizations and collaborative efforts that we're taking to make sure that Nevadan voters are able to understand the process, can ask questions and have them answered in a timely manner, and have, again, across the state, every corner, every population center of every background, they have the ability to ask technical questions or easy questions about changing party affiliation or updating your address, the full spectrum of elections-related questions, having information that's available to those voters in a manner of their choosing also. We've discussed and put a heavy focus on making sure that we meet voters where they're at, so that we're not just providing, say, a TikTok dance thing, for example, and then assuming that older or my generation of voters necessarily hear it or understand it, nor are we putting out just a postcard and assuming that's going to be effective either. We want to make sure that we're meeting eligible voters where they're at to provide that information.
Gabriel DeCara for the record. I will say it was tough to convince Deputy Velashin not to do a TikTok dance series to try and turn out the vote for the presidential preference primary, but he eventually acquiesced. The state did send a postcard to all registered voters in advance of the presidential preference primary, informing them of the new election. I will say that that took a large chunk out of our voter outreach budget, sending postcards to 1.9 million people. The costs can add up, but we wanted to communicate directly with voters. There were two versions of the postcard. One went to Democratic and Republican voters, informing them of the presidential preference primary and explaining how the process would work, as well as listing the candidates who had filed. And the other side contained election information for the June and November elections. The other version of the postcard went to every nonpartisan and minor party affiliated voter, informing them that there would be a presidential preference primary, and if they wanted to participate, that they would need to update their party registration to Democrat or Republican. When I say a significant chunk, I don't have these numbers with me, but we can absolutely provide them to the committee. I believe the postcard ended up costing somewhere around $700,000 to send, again, to every registered active voter in the state of Nevada out of a voter outreach budget that is not much larger than that. So we may also be asking for additional funds to communicate with voters in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. One last point to make regarding the postcard. In addition to informing voters about the process, it was also an important step in our voter list maintenance. Every piece of official election mail that is sent to a voter that is returned as undeliverable enables the clerk or registrar to take steps defined by statute to ultimately cleanse our voter rolls of individuals who have moved out of state or are otherwise identified as being inactive. That postcard was a first major step in that process that will continue, albeit in limited manners because of the requirements under federal law to do or not do certain things during certain time periods, but that was also a very important element to that postcard process.
Thank you, Mark. There's one more point I want to make that we need to address. One of the biggest obstacles to election administration is misinformation. For example, it is a fact that tabulating ballots by hand presents more risk to the electoral process than tabulation by machine. Deputy Velashin and his team, as well as the elected and appointed clerks and registers across Nevada, have done everything in their power to make that clear to their constituents, their elected peers, and the public at large. That has not stopped the point from being raised over and over again. As Secretary of State, I am a regulator. All throughout my campaign, I said it would be my job to call balls and strikes. Now I'm in office, and I'm making those calls. It is my hope that every member of this committee, regardless of party affiliation, will join me. The clerks and registers across Nevada, their staff, and my staff all need your help. This is a team effort. Please, for the sake of the upcoming presidential election cycle and for election workers across this state, speak out about election misinformation. Each elected official in this room is in office because Nevada runs the most secure, fair, and accessible elections in the country. You can help us spread that message to every voter in your community. We'll now take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy, and Deputy Washington. Thank you for the presentation. Members, I just have a couple of quick questions, then I'd like to open it up to members. I think my first question has to go to slide 5 on voter turnout. It looks like there was a strong preference in the presidential preference primary for mail ballots. 78.27% of voters opted to vote by mail, according to the data that you presented. And I just wondered, that trend, was it consistent across all 17 counties where voters preferred to vote by mail as opposed to early voting or voting on election day? And then I also wonder if that trend also was consistent via party between the Democrats and the registered Republicans as to that preference for voting by mail ballot in the presidential preference primary.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Velashin for the record. In general, yes. There were certain counties where it was more balanced, perhaps, or that leaned more closely towards early voting or election day voting. But again, in general, across the state, the trend was uniform by party and very much leaned towards a preference for mail ballot. Again, some of those voters may have cast a mail ballot on election day, and that's the day they decided to bring it in. So there is some overlap that I think perhaps the numbers may not clearly identify, but in general, and we have the breakdown specifically by county, by method as well, so that we can provide that to the committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Cisco Aguilar for the record. Also, too, in April, we held a special election in Henderson for City Council. Those statistics were similar to those we saw in the presidential preferential primary as well.
Thank you. So that also showed a preference towards people using the mail ballot option as opposed to early voting or in person, Mr. Secretary.
Cisco Aguilar, for the record, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And then my second question, the teleinterpreter, 200 languages, 200 plus languages, video interpreter for hearing impaired at polling stations. Is there any data for the presidential preference primary for early voting and election day balloting as to how many people took advantage of that? And if not, is that something that maybe we could be provided with in the future?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. Not yet is the short answer. The presidential preference primary we use as an opportunity to ask about the number of individuals that requested those services, and that informed a contract that we've started, a pilot program that we're going to have in place for the next few months that we'll likely take advantage of even during the upcoming Palomino Valley General Improvement District recall election that's coming up in April. So there's an extra election then, and then that will help inform us as we continue to right size it for the needs of the electorate looking to the June and November elections. And I will make a point to make sure that the committee does get the numbers that result from that usage.
Thank you very much. And then one other question I thought of, and this might be a question really for the registrars and clerks, but the vote centers that were open for the presidential preference primary, do you feel that was consistent with what we've had in the past in terms of the numbers of vote centers per county? And if that's really something I should ask the clerks, I'm happy to ask them that question.
Chair, thank you for the question. Mark Volosh for the record. I would defer to the clerks and registrars if it's possible.
Thank you very much. And Deputy Voloshin, I don't even know how to access TikTok, so you're not old, and I don't consider myself old either, but I admire that you tried to reach out to voters on TikTok. Members, any questions for our Secretary of State, Chief Deputy DeCara, and Deputy Voloshin? Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. My first comment would be I am actually concerned that presidential candidates who don't live in Nevada don't have to pay fees to file. Where, I really, anytime that, Nevadans are paying for something and people that don't live in our state aren't, that seems to be a challenge. So I definitely want to, two-thirds or not, discuss that further. But with that, my question is, and we received, as I'm sure your office did as well, numerous questions about people's ability to vote in both a caucus and a primary, and the legality of that, and also the consideration for that. So I'm going to try to keep my questions very specific so we can drill down to it. When your office is reporting the numbers, is it right to assume that you'll be reporting the numbers of just what occurred in the primaries, in all of the primaries, as opposed to any caucus activity that occurred?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mark Volosh for the record. That is correct and accurate. We will only be reporting the numbers of turnout relating to elections covered by Title 24.
Gabriel DeCara for the record, and in addition to a sort of adjacent question, because we did get a number of questions from voters who asked the same thing, as did the clerks. The only elections that are regulated under state law are elections run by the state in terms of whether an individual was qualified to vote for the caucus or et cetera, any of the questions related to the caucus. There's no statute that addresses a party's own nominating activities. So from the state's perspective, we said, yes, absolutely. If the party says you can participate, you can participate. We strictly regulate the state-run primary.
Follow-up, Chair?
Please go ahead, Assemblywoman.
So in that regard, so that, because I know there were, again, many people that had questions, and not making this partisan, because people from every, all over the spectrum had questions about this. Would that then render any caucus activity a ceremonial, or does that not come into play because of the way the parties work when it comes to national nominations in that way? I guess the question too was specifically if there was ever a conflict in what the results were.
Thank you for the question, Gabriel DeCara for the record. A party's method of choosing their nominee is entirely up to them. Parties could have chosen, as the Democratic Party did, to allocate their delegates based on the results of the state-run primary, but that is entirely their choice. The statute calls for the state to run the election if more than one candidate files, and to report the results to the parties, which is what we have done. The party's process for choosing their nominees is entirely their business. As it relates to the presidential election in November, per statute, the major parties must provide to the Secretary of State's office the name of their nominee for president and vice president not later than September 1st. First business day in September. That is the next point at which the presidential nominating process touches the state. The party tells us who goes on the ballot, and we place those names on the ballot.
Oh. Any follow-up?
No, thank you for that.
Thank you. And then up in Carson City, any questions from members up at the Legislative Building in Carson City? If so, please.
Not at this time, Mr. Chair. Maybe after the next presentation.
Thank you. And Assemblywoman Dickman, I think I saw your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I actually have a couple of questions, but I guess my first one would be, were there any counties using the new system, the VREM, during the primary?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Mark Velosh, for the record. No, the implementation of the top-down voter registration system is going to go live on April 1st, so it was not in use during the presidential preference primary. That being said, Clark County does have an instance. They began their transition to that process, to the same solution a year and a half or 2 years ago, at least at this point, I believe. So they have already been working through it, but that transition is in parallel to the other 16 counties currently.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Assemblywoman?
If I may.
Sure, go ahead.
What is the process going to be to validate this system before the primary? Like, are you going to do mock elections? Is there a possibility of this type of glitch that we had this time?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mark Velosh, for the record. Yes, absolutely. In fact, there is a mock election coming up. I want to clarify that I'm stressing that element of your question and not the potential for a glitch. We very much have begun the validation process of the data transfer from the old 17 or 16 county systems to a unified data set. That work continues. We continue to identify, again, information and make sure that it's, we're scrubbing it repeatedly. There were, in fact, 3 different data pulls that will be conducted prior to a transition to make sure the first one occurred prior to the new year, second one earlier this year, and then the third one will be coming up towards the end of March. Each of those data pulls gets analyzed, compared, examined, both against the previous data as well as once it's aggregated into a centralized database. And then ultimately, as you highlighted in March, we will be conducting a mock election, a 2-day event with significant amounts of follow-up for follow-on training. And to lead up to the June election. It's also anticipated that, as I mentioned, the Palomino Valley General Improvement District has a special election coming up in April. That's in Washoe County. Washoe County does, at least as of today, anticipate using that new system for that special election as well. So numerous attempts and efforts to make sure that the information is done properly. Massive statewide IT projects are not simple by any stretch of the imagination. They require a lot of work and effort, and in fact, we'll be talking about that here momentarily. But yes, ma'am, the goal is to have validation prior to the June and November elections.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, could I ask one more?
Absolutely, Assemblywoman Dickman. I just do want to remind you and other members that we do have agenda item 6 coming up, an update on the implementation of centralized statewide voter registration database. So there might be some questions that are for that agenda, but please go ahead if they're related to this agenda item. Otherwise, we're also going to have agenda item 6 too in a little bit.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, with this thing that happened, the glitch in the data, were there guardrails in place that you would have known about it? Did you know about it? Or did you only find out about it because voters reported it?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Gabriel DeCara, for the record. As the Secretary said, our office has now put out a statement and a memo that details exactly what happened. It is somewhat boring to explain. It relates to the process by which the 17 separate county systems send their voter registration information to the state that then stitches those 17 files together into a single statewide voter file. And that single file is then what conveys information to voters from the state's website. To answer your question directly, there are a number of guardrails in place at the Secretary of State's office whenever, obviously during elections, we absolutely watch the process as closely as we can. That being said, as it related to these nightly updates of these files, this specific issue was not caught by the state because the discrepancy was between what the voter was seeing on the state's website and what they knew about whether or not they voted. The state does not have access to the county's election management systems. The counties could compare the data in the voter registration database to the data in the election management system about who voted and identify where there may be issues. Of the state, because we could not because we could not see who actually voted, it did take a little while for us to become aware that there was an issue. However, to be absolutely clear, once the issue was identified, and this was on Sunday evening, the state, a number of state staff, myself, Deputy Volashin, the secretary, all became aware. We got state staff on the phone to identify what the issue was. As soon as we identified that it appeared to be a misinterpretation of code that was coming from the counties, we knew that we would need the county's help to address the issue. We set a call with the county clerks and their IT folks for 8 o'clock in the morning on President's Day. We all joined the call and talked through what the potential issue could be, potential solutions, et cetera. Again, I will absolutely send the report to this committee. I don't want to go too far down the weeds because it is a lengthy explanation. That being said, again, the core issue here, which was the erroneous information that was displayed, again, at no point was county data incorrect or state data incorrect. It was just an incorrect message that was displayed based on that data. That is a result of the bottom-up system, that stitching together of those 17 different files. Once there is a single state system that is in constant communication, that entire process is not necessary. There's no longer a need for the state to interpret county data and stitch things together from different systems, different election management systems, voter registration systems, et cetera. Once everyone's on the same page, that entire process just doesn't exist anymore. Again, the specifics of what occurred are addressed in that report, and they're very in the weeds, but I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you
really appreciate the indulgence, Chair. As we all know, there's so many people who have voters who have a lot of distrust in our election system. So I think the more information we get out, the better. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Chief Deputy Tagara, Mr. Secretary, and Deputy Secretary Washington. I appreciate all your efforts, to fix that glitch and to inform us, and appreciate the information. Thank you for everything you've done. Members, any questions up here at the Sawyer Building? And any in Carson City that I might have missed? Any on Zoom? Senator Seaver Scancer, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, if I don't want to miss anybody who's got questions. And up at the Legislative Building in Carson City? Okay, not seeing any further questions, then I believe we're going to have a presentation from some representatives of our offices of Nevada County Clerks and Registrars of Voters. So thank you, Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy, and Deputy. I think we're going to have our registrars come up now, and then I think we'll be seeing you again for agenda items 5 and 6. So.
They're on the next one, too.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we're moving on to agenda item 5 now. I'm sorry, I lost place there. So agenda item 5, discussion concerning election administrators, including the recruitment of temporary and permanent staff. And Deputy Woloshyn and our registrar, we're so glad that you're here. Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Woloshyn, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections for the record. I believe we're joined also by some clerks and registrars, registrar in Carson City, who hopefully will come up there. Perfect. So first and foremost, I want to provide a brief intro with some information provided to me by other clerks who were not able to attend today and provided some testimony. Ultimately, this agenda item does cover 2 separate topics: the retention and recruitment of full-time equivalents, county employees, as well as the temporary poll workers that are so vital to this process. As was relayed to me, there were 2 elements that I want to highlight very quickly before I pass it off to the registrar and clerks for their input. One, a general theme across the board is that pay continues to be a challenge for the FTE side of things, those full-time equivalents. Counties work to make sure that their staff are equipped, paid appropriately, but some of the clerks have notified me, and this is something we're looking closely at, about the pay requirements that are dictated by NRS. There's at least in some cases, and not to go into a specific situation, but there's some clerks who make between $5,000 and $7,000 less than their staff do. So when we talk about long-term retention and encouraging long-term election officials to stay in the sphere, there's just not a lot of motivation for someone to apply to run for office as a clerk when they are getting paid more and they need to take care of their families, those sorts of things. So that continues to be a challenge that each county will address, and I suspect you'll hear about more in a moment. The second, and no one, I do need to be clear, no one wants to complain about workload, but the workload is significant, and I think the committee needs to be made aware of that. Collectively, the clerks and registrars work on weekends, not because they want to, but because it's essentially a requirement, through holidays as well. Too many of them, I think, answer my texts and emails between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. Than they probably want to, but that workload combined with the pay discrepancy certainly makes it a challenge to hire staff to a county or state position. Those are things, again, I know it sounds like I'm complaining, and I want to be clear that's not the case. We all collectively recognize the important role that we play in supporting the foundation of our democracy. It's a privilege that every one of us embraces. We are, frankly, get a little bit giddy when we talk about how we support voters, and when we talk to a first-time voter. I talked to a young woman shortly after her 18th birthday, voted in Sparks during the presidential preference primary, and seeing the joy immeasurable in its comparison to other work-related events. But the workload and the pay do create significant challenges. And we cannot continue, I think, as part of this discussion. I just want to be mindful that right now some have expressed that we're relying on the patriotism, fidelity, and dedication of our county election officials and their staff. That's a hard thing to continue to ask as we look to the 3, I mentioned the 4th election this year, and potentially up to as many as 6 others, depending on the recall processes that are currently in place. So again, that being said, if you want to talk about the joys of the job, we will eagerly do that off hours, weekends, whenever. But the committee asked for some feedback relating to the challenges to hiring staff and poll workers. So therefore, I will turn it over to the Registrar of Voters for Clark County first.
Thank you, Deputy Registrar Portillo. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Orenshaw, committee members. Lorena Portillo, Clark County Registrar of Voters for the record. I do want to thank you for this opportunity, number one, and of course for your support, Secretary of State support, commissioners, and county management. Everyone that makes elections possible is definitely taken into account. We're very appreciative. Outreach members, we have advocacy groups that we work with. It takes a village, a city, a whole state to put this together, so I cannot thank everyone enough. I want to make sure everyone knows we're very grateful here. We have a staff of about 46 now. Just to put things in perspective, when I started in 1998, we had about a little over 400,000 active registered voters, and we started with 42 permanent staff members. We have now over 1.3 million registered voters, and we're slowly creeping to 46 permanent staff members, which is thanks to our county management and commissioners listening to us and making sure we have the staff we need. In addition, we did informed them that, we have to keep up with the hourly rate that's around us, and they did provide us with an hourly rate increase that significantly kept folks throughout the election cycle. We used to see folks leaving before Election Day, and that really hurt us during previous elections. That caused a lot of strain in our staff. Our staff members, we have a lot of veterans, thankfully, and there's folks that come back. We have retirees coming back as contractors because we need to continue, running successful elections, so we thank them as well. We do many things to continue the election cycles despite folks canceling at the last minute, right before Election Day. We can get tens and sometimes hundreds of folks saying, sorry, can't do it. And we do have systems in place to bring folks that can help us, but it does get challenging. However, increasing the rate was critical, and it did work this time around. We also have team leaders that are also helping us as trainers. So there's nothing more important than training our election workers appropriately, and it really works. And I want to share this with everyone because it helps that the trainers are also working at the polls. They need to see what the voters need at the polls, what's happening at the polls. So that's also working for us as well. The pay, though, is very, very important. Outreach is very important. We go out to schools. We want folks to know that 16, 17, 18-year-olds can work for us, and they're very excited to get some funds in for prom. I see the excitement in their eyes when we go out there. We work very closely with organizations. We do have also a program. It's called Raise the Vote, where we can pay directly to the organization for their volunteers' work on Election Day. That has helped us as well. I just want to share a little bit of what we have done that has helped us. We are open to any ideas. Commissioners have put our newsletter in their newsletters, which is very helpful. County departments, city departments, we work really close with them as well. We beg and plead for assistance all the time, and of course the support from the Secretary of State as well. I would just want to thank you for this opportunity, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, before I open it up for questions, I definitely want to take my hat off to our county election department and our Secretary of State's office. Harkening back to my first time voting here in Southern Nevada in the last century, a long time ago, and I remember the only option was on Election Day, and there were absentee ballots for folks who were very ill or out of the jurisdiction. But what you do now with all the Election Day and early voting vote centers and opportunities for people to be able to participate, even if maybe they have to work on the actual Election Day and are unable to go there. It's really amazing what you do, and it's amazing that the staff, that with such a small staff, you've been able to do that. One question I have before I open it up to other members, with the presidential preference primary, about how many temporary employees did you have to cover all the early voting vote centers and Election Day vote centers here in Clark County?
Lorena Portillo, for the record. We did have a full system for early voting and Election Day. We had about 30 to 35 sites open daily during the 7 days of early voting, and we had 127 sites open on Election Day. We trained and recruited over 3,000 election workers for the polls, but also for our in-house staff, for our hotlines, mail ballot processes for registration, our warehouse. We hire in various divisions and also for the polls. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Deputy Woloshyn or our registrar? Members, I apologize if we can hold off on questions. We have some more presenters up in Carson City, and then I will get back to all the members that had questions. Going up to Carson City, whoever would like to begin, please state your name for the record and proceed. And you can tell this is my first interim committee of the interim. I'm a little rusty at this, so sorry about that up in Carson City. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Scott Hohen, Carson City Clerk Recorder for the record. Thank you for allowing us to appear today and answering your questions. I would echo what Mr. Woloshyn said about clerk recorder compensation. I just encourage the Legislative Commission to look at NRS 245.043, pay for elected officials. If you look at that schedule, there hasn't been an increase for this position since 2019. So I would like you to do that. It's also important to understand that Lorena is the registrar of voters in Las Vegas, and that's what she does, and that's the only thing that she does. Amy and Douglas and I, we wear other hats at the same time. So I'm the clerk, I'm the recorder, I'm running the elections, I'm the public administrator, marriage, notary. There's just a lot of hats for our 40,000 registered voters that we have. We mailed out about 24,000 out of the 40,000 to the Democratic and Republican Party, the ballots. We had 86 election workers, and I can't thank them enough. I mean, they're the sound of democracy. I mean, they're working for pittance. We only pay $12.50 an hour. They're not really working for pay, but they appreciate the income and appreciate the thought. That 86, this presidential preference primary will probably balloon to 130, 140 during the June primary. It's just we didn't have the significant turnout. One thing that we did face a lot that you guys should just know about is our phones blew up because of the confusion between the presidential preference primary and the caucus and how that all worked. People were asking, why didn't certain candidates appear on the presidential preference ballot? How can I vote, or can I vote twice, like Miss Miller said, and just what precinct do I live in? So we referred a lot of those to the party, like Mr. Woloshyn said, but it was significant in terms of an interruption in our workflow. I only have 2.5 full-time people, 2.5 people plus myself running the election, and it's a challenge, but we step up. We've got a lot of things going on at the same time. We've got the mock election we're trying to implement that Mr. Woloshyn is talking about the end of March. And with all these competing things going on, we're making it work. It's just a challenge, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Registrar Hohen. Thank you for the report from Carson City. And good morning. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you. Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. And I'm not going to reiterate everything that has been said, as we're all in agreement as far as staffing issues and challenges with pay. I will just state, as far as the pay goes and the compensation for the clerks, like Scott has said, the registrars are separate. They're not listed under the same NRS that the clerks, clerk recorder, clerk treasurers are. My office is the clerk treasurer's office, so we have the clerk's office, the treasurer's office, and elections that I oversee. It's a monumental task. It's a lot. Elections is probably 90% of what I do because it is so vital, especially in a presidential year. So I'm lucky that I have staff that is super competent when I am knee-deep in elections to be able to run the other departments. Not all the rural counties are that lucky. A lot of the clerks, clerk treasurers, clerk recorders are doing all the work every day and trying to also make sure that this top-down system that's vital to the state is implemented correctly. So with that, as far as the election workers, like Scott said, the election workers are the heart and soul of us being able to do what we do with the implementation of the mail ballots, universal mail ballots, which, as you saw, has been successful. People do enjoy being able to vote their ballot from the comfort of their home and then either mail it in or drop it off to our office. But it has brought in the need for more election workers because now we have a whole nother election process that we have to do every election cycle. So typically Douglas County, we have amazing patriots that live in our jurisdiction that want to be a part of the process. I usually get between 100 and 120 election workers without even having to advertise. These are people that come back year after year. This election, I had 46 that we were working with. I had to bring in county staff to help run the vote centers on election day, and God bless them for doing it. They volunteered, they were eager and willing, but that increases my budget because I have to pay their full-time wage versus being able to pay my election workers $12 an hour. So I'm hoping that that was just a hiccup in the fact that this was the first time that we've done a presidential preference primary. They had other plans, they weren't aware, whatever the situation was. I'm very hopeful that they will come back for the primary and the general election. So with that, if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bergens. We appreciate everything you're doing in Douglas County and everything you've been doing. Members, we will get to questions. Actually, I think we have one more registrar who's going to speak, and then we'll get to questions. So thank you, Ms. Bergens. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Carrie Ann Burgess, and I am the interim registrar of Washoe County. I'm not going to go on to anything else that anybody else has said because Lorena has spoken eloquently, so has Scott, and so has Amy. Lorena and I are different because we are the registrars, but we have the same issues. We have the same problems with getting permanent staff to stay. We went from a staff of about 2 years ago to of about 6 in Washoe County to we have staff for 19. We're at 16 at the moment. It's really hard to maintain and keep people when the burnout is absolutely real. Having come from another state doing elections, and I was burnt out. That's why I left. Now I know what to do to mitigate that in my team and also myself. But also, Deputy Voloshin said it clearly, we work weekends, we work nights, we miss parties, we miss kids' activities to make sure that our elections go off without a hitch. Having the support of the legislature and this committee is absolutely key to our success. And it also helps with our recruitment when it comes to our election workers. We had about 150 election workers in our house and also working our vote centers this year, or for this election. And it's going to be about 600-700 for the primary and the general. Making sure that we can absolutely keep those people is key to our success. And with that, if there's any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Registrar Burgess, and I definitely want to let all the registrars who presented today know how much we appreciate your hard work. Certainly asking for another election to be put on was a lot, and I appreciate how seamlessly it went and how many constituents I've had contact me saying this was such an easier process than past years when they had to try to find the caucus site and go to the one location that they were supposed to go to, and the confusion. And so I think we all appreciate that. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Assemblywoman Mosca, Vice Chair Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to continue that line and really thank you all, the state, the counties, the clerks, the registrars, for a successful presidential preference primary, our first one. And when I went up north and got to meet with some of you and learn about it and see it, I think there's just so much that not everybody understands about how it works. So I appreciate you all sharing what it's like on the ground. And for me personally, I learned a lot between the difference of what is in the state's purview versus what's in the registrars and the clerks. And would love if you can talk on the record, because it's a public meeting, for our Nevadans to understand what are the differences, how you all work together, and how that's increased over time.
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Mark Vlach, for the record. I'll start in summary. Again, out of our 17 counties, we have 2 appointed registrars of voters. Clark and Washoe counties were selected by their boards of county commission. The other 15 are elected officials. And I would ask in a moment for Amy and Scott in Carson City to speak to some of the nuance. The registrars and those of us in the elections division, I like to say we have the privilege of focusing on elections full time. Whereas for the county, the other 15 county clerks / recorder / treasurer / clerk of the court / about 15 other things, elections truly are one of a number of elements that they work on to support their electorate. And perhaps Clerk Bergens, Clerk Recorder Hohen, you could speak to some of that, please.
Scott Hohen, Carson City Clerk Recorder. It's a challenge for sure. When we talk about working weekends long hours. I mean, we're 12, 13-hour a day job right now, and you try to fit in your other responsibilities early in the morning or in the afternoon or on the weekends, to be honest with you. It's just catch up. I mean, elections take priority in terms of what we do. When you hear about the 10, 11 clerk recorders that have transitioned out of that job and new ones coming in. I've only been at this job for a year. I was elected in 2022 and one of the newbies, and this was my first election. And I learned a lot, and I'm ready for the top down, and I'm ready for June. But the brain drain is there because of the hours, because of the pay and the assistance there. So just be aware of that. But we all care. We all care deeply about what we do. We enjoy the job. I'm not complaining about the hours. I've never worked harder in my life, but it's for a great cause, and we look for the right people to do this job. But yeah, when Mark talks about the different responsibilities, I'm also the public administrator, and that's a separate job all by itself in all the different counties across the Nevada. That's the way it is with the Carson City Charter. So there's a lot of responsibility placed on my shoulders, and I think we're doing a good job, and I think we're trying to do more and more outreach, like Lorena said. The more and more we can get out, or I can get out and go to party functions or community groups to explain the process and welcome them in to become totally transparent in what we do. We're making it a little bit easier for everybody to understand exactly what goes on with elections.
Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. So I don't know if I misunderstood the question, but I'm going to answer what I heard, which was how the state and the counties work together. As far as the elections go, the counties themselves, the clerks, the registrars, and their staff are the ones that are boots on the ground. We're the ones that are actually running the election. The Secretary of State during that time is support staff for us. They will jump through hoops for us if we have questions about any of the processes, any of interpretation of NRS. They are always available for us. But it is the clerks and the counties themselves that are actually doing the work. So we're the ones that are vetting the ballots and ensuring that they get mailed out. We're in a transition phase with Secretary Aguilar. He has taken on some things that in the past were individual county by county. He has implemented statewide or the potential for a statewide mail ballot vendor. So a lot of the counties have signed on to that, which has been helpful for some of the smaller counties that have a hard time getting a mail ballot vendor because they are so small that it's not financially beneficial to the vendor to take on a county that has 3,000 mail ballots. Douglas County has 45,000 or almost 45,000 registered voters, so we have chosen to stick with our current mail ballot vendor. However, the process based on the information that I have received has gone very smooth with the transition for those smaller counties to a statewide vendor. So we work together. We're a team. Even though the clerks and the counties are doing the work themselves, they're the ones that are running the election. The Secretary of State has been, and his office has been incredible support for us in being able to do our job.
Thank you very much, Registrar Hohen and Clerk Registrar Bergens, and Registrar Portillo. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Lorena Portillo. For the record, just really quick, that key word together, we do have to work together. And I have received various comments from folks that come from other states that are, they can't believe how close we work together, other clerks and the registrar in Washoe. We see each other as colleagues. We do not see each other as separate counties. We are a county, but we're also the full state of Nevada. We understand that each voter counts for us, whether it's 1.3 million or 900 in the county in Esmeralda. But I really want to point out how wonderful the camaraderie is here in the state of Nevada. That is special, and I will work very hard to continue that. I invite all my colleagues in other counties to come and learn from us if there's anything we can help with. We have extensive training opportunities, and we have offered it to them as well. They have come and worked with us and learned with us, and we want to continue that to ensure the success for every election cycle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Assemblywoman Mosca, any follow-up?
No, just thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions here at the Sawyer Building? Not seeing any. Down in Carson City, Senator Daley, I believe you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I can get the clerk recorder and whatever else you do, all the stuff, thanks. Can you cite that NRS again for me? I missed it.
Scott Hohen, Carson City Clerk Recorder, it's 245.043. And it's not just clerk recorder, it's assessor, it's treasurer, it's DA, it's all of those positions.
And I understand it's something that I've been looking at. I know county commissioners, various things, the same thing. And then follow up on Washoe County, and I know we have separate deals, so you're not the same as them, you're not elected, you're appointed. Is your salary covered in statute, or does the board get to make that when they appoint you? So it's a slightly different issue in your situation.
Yes, Carrie Ann Burgess for Washoe County. Yes, mine and Lorena, we are a little bit different. Our boards are the ones who set our salaries because we do 100% elections. And I'm just going to be very clear. Elections is not just in every other year. It's not just every other year. We do stuff every single year to ensure the quality of our elections. We do voter maintenance in between elections. We do it on off years. People think that elections are quite literally one day or just early voting. Elections start at least 120 days before Election Day. With saying that, I want to make sure that everybody in the state, along with the other clerks who are elected, this isn't just it's just not an even year job. It is an all the time job. Elections are.
And I appreciate that, and I'm fairly familiar. I've been in the Washoe County office several times. Of course, when I file, I worked on voter registration, my previous work before I retired. I know maybe I don't know about the smaller counties because there's less precincts, but I know the precincts for the city elections and various things are changing. You can't change the district maps that are set by the state, but the precincts are an ongoing thing with the city of Reno, city of Sparks, and I'm sure similar issues in Clark County as well, where the population is. But so I'm familiar with all of the various aspects of the work that has to be done on an ongoing basis. So I do thank you for that. Final question, if I can, Mr. Chair. I've heard all three of you, four of you actually speak about the top-down and the integration and that shift that's going on. And it sounds like you're all in support and that's going to clean some things up. It seems to me that it will have additional safeguards of backups. Not only you're going to have yours, but it's going to be from the state, and that. So, do you guys think that that's a positive change moving forward? Anybody can answer.
Carrie Ann Burgess with Washoe County. I am actually going to answer that. Coming from my other state, I did have a top-down system, and when I heard that Nevada was going to the top-down system, I was very excited. It does have a lot of safeguards. It does help with the reporting. It makes it so that all 17 of us are not trying to push our voted data and then having them to integrate it like Deputy Voloshin and the Chief Deputy had explained earlier. This is also it's going to be very beneficial also for our voters, as all of our systems now talk to each other. It's one system, so a voter cannot go to Washoe County and then 2 days later go to Clark County and try to vote. We'll catch those. We'll be able to have a lot easier, cleaner rolls, because when somebody moves from Washoe County to Douglas, we see that immediately. so then they get taken off of the Washoe County and get put on Douglas, and where those types of voter cleanup is going to be a lot easier and a lot more streamlined. So it's going to be for me, coming from the top-down system and coming to a bottom-up system, I'm really looking forward to it.
So it will create some efficiencies, save the state money, save each of your offices some resources as well to be applied in other areas. So, thank you.
Do you mind if I, Chair, if I go ahead and respond also?
Sure, please go ahead,
Okay.
Ms. Bergens. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say, and to piggyback off what Carrie said, some of the processes that she was talking about, we already have in place, but we don't see them until the next day because our system has to send the information to the Secretary of State, and then the state's office pushes that down to the counties. So the changes that she's referring to will be immediate. As soon as she puts something in Washoe, I'll be able to see it in Douglas instead of waiting until the next day. So I didn't want anyone to think that we don't already catch those. We do. It's just not an immediate process, and it will be with this new system.
And thank you. One more question, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead, Senator Daly.
A follow-up along the lines of what you just said, and I was familiar with that when I worked for the labor union, and we would try to check our members' voter registration to see if they were registered, and we try to go get them registered, family members, et cetera. And we ended up using and going to the state's database because they had all of the counties, and we had multiple counties that our area covered. But when we tried to get the data from each county, each thing was just a little bit different. People would put the address in a different field. They'd have the P.O. box before the street number or vice versa. So this will fix all of those problems. So anyone that's trying to utilize the database for turnout or voter registration projects or campaigns or whatever, I think it will help and be more efficient for them as well.
If I may, sorry, Chair.
Please go ahead.
This is also going to put more of the burden of reporting after elections is very cumbersome on the counties. And because the state doesn't have access to our system, we do reports for at least a month, 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months to pull the data that the state needs for competent reporting of some of the stats that Chief Deputy Falashin gave you earlier. This will allow the state to be able to take the weight off of the counties of pulling some of that data, and they will be able to do it themselves. And I will tell you that the counties are thrilled. So we are very excited for the state to be able to take on that process. So yes, we are excited about the new system.
Thank you very much. And actually, I had one question. I want to make sure I don't miss any questions. I don't see anyone here at Sawyer Building. On Zoom, members, any questions? Clerk Registrar Bergens, you'd mentioned that the new plan that the Secretary's office is spearheading to find a vendor for the ballots will be helpful to the smaller counties that have had difficulty finding a vendor that would be able to provide those ballots. Has that been a situation that Douglas faced in the past in terms of finding that vendor for the mail ballots? Or I just wondered if you could speak a little more about the benefits you see with that plan for the vendor with the mail ballots.
Thank you. Yes. Amy Bergens, Douglas County Clerk Treasurer. So Douglas County has not had an issue because we have a substantial amount of registered voters. So having, 40,000+ registered voters means, besides those that have opt-out, which is few, we're sending out 40,000 mail ballots. During any primary or general election, of course, the PPP was closer to 30,000. We have not had an issue in years past finding a mail ballot vendor because we are one of the largest rurals. So, however, smaller counties that have, like Esmeralda, 900, Lincoln County, I believe, has 3,000 registered voters. It makes it difficult to find a mail ballot vendor that will give you the time and attention that you need. And as you know, it's important that the ballots are done correctly and in a statutory time frame. So this election, the PPP, was the first election that those counties used the state vendor. And from everything that I have heard in conversation with the other clerks, it was successful. There were very minimal issues, hiccups, I would say, nothing that affected the voters, and just internal hiccups that we had to get through, and they're looking forward to continuing to use it. I think that there is potential for more of us to switch over to that contract once our contracts with our current vendors expire.
Thank you very much, Clerk Registrar Bergens. Thanks for the information there. And thank you to Secretary Aguilar and Deputy Walsh and Chief Deputy DeGara for spearheading that legislation last session to try to provide that opportunity, especially to our smaller counties. Members, any additional questions, anything I might have missed on Zoom? I'm not seeing, but please don't be shy to jump in if I don't want to miss any members. With that, we will now close agenda item number 5, and we'll move on to agenda item 6, which I know it feels like we've actually really kind of spoken a lot about agenda item 6 and agenda items 4 and 5. So I appreciate Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy, and Deputy for sticking around here. And I know we've covered a lot of information on agenda item 6, but thank you for sticking around.
Mr. Chairman, one clarification. Actually, Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez was instrumental in the statewide contract, and so I'd like to thank her for her vision, her initiative in making sure that happened for our county clerks. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Thank you. I remember that legislation, and thank you for your hard work on that.
Thank you, guys.
We're back. Mr. Chair, we'll now move on to as much of the discussion already about the voter registration and election management system, or VREMS as we refer to it. This system, in addition to modernizing our elections process, would remove any potential for errors like the one that happened this weekend from happening again. The legislature called for a top-down voter registration system, and my team is working day and night to make sure that happens. So, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mark Voloshin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Starting with an overview of the top-down voter registration system, Chair. The next handful of slides are going to talk about the process, slightly looking backwards, but primarily looking forward to give you an update as to where the process is currently. So the transition to a top-down voter registration system, as the Secretary mentioned, was directed by the passage of Assembly Bill 422 in the 2021 legislative session. This transition, again, a little bit of explanation, will bring us in line with what all but, I believe, 5 or 6 other states across the country already currently have. And what this means, we'll go into here in a few slides. Looking at slide 3, this depicts graphically what it means to go from being a bottom-up system where we currently are to a top-down. Essentially, in the previous or as-is version, 17 counties had 17 databases, potentially as many as 17 different vendors for an election management system. Each of those would provide information to the state in a nightly process that gets aggregated that we discussed a little bit earlier. You could imagine, again, in kind of a worst case scenario, so to speak, if we had 17 completely different vendors and different databases, the challenge that would have come from a technical standpoint in aggregating that data. It's very similar when you have different election management system vendors, like copying Windows to a Macintosh type or Apple computer file system. You have to do things to convert the files so that they work together. That's where we are currently. What we're moving to is a centralized database where, as was mentioned just previously, the counties will be working together on the same system. And there's a number of benefits that I'd like to highlight about that process, not the least of which is the fact that it will be in real time. You can see on this slide, this is slide 4 now, that there's a number of benefits to transitioning to a top-down system, and that is part of the reason why it is the norm across the country, not the exception. There is an additional one that I'd like to highlight that came up just earlier today as well that's not on the slide. We've talked a little bit about the transition across the state and the counties, the turnover rates from election officials that had in some cases decades of experience to some of those, myself included, who have not yet been through a full 4-year federal cycle. Having a singular top-down system will also support training in a consistent manner. Instead of having 17 counties with 17 systems where, truth be told, I've never actually looked at, logged into, or used a county election management system, as the state does not have one. Going forth, the state, all 17 counties will be on the same system so that training can be standardized. When a new clerk gets elected or a new staff member hired, their onboarding can be made into a much more efficient manner with consistent information that's been kid tested, mother approved, that sort of thing, to really expedite their onboarding. There will be an increase in requirements for the Secretary of State. Again, I want to be clear that these are responsibilities and not statutory requirements. To be clear, the passage of Assembly Bill 422 did change statutes, but it did not shift the onus of the responsibilities from the county election officials to the Secretary of State. And I do want to be clear, that question comes up quite a bit. The county election officials are still responsible to their electorate for maintaining information, for registering voters, for conducting the vast majority of the electoral process. This does not change that at all or suddenly put all of the authorities into the hands of the Secretary of State. It simply, again, it takes advantage of those efficiencies and changes some of the business processes. You know, and I mentioned support and training just a minute ago, but there's also discussion ongoing about cybersecurity standards, what that looks like. Clerk Bergens mentioned the records request process. Currently, there's a number of post-election reports that we get contacted about. That the answer is, unfortunately, you have to contact all 17 counties individually to get that information. Going forward, that won't be the case, and we'll be able to provide with the same information. And that's specifically because if we, as an office, are not the custodian of that record and we don't have access to it, we cannot provide it. But going forth, we'll all be on the same page about the information and have access to it, which again will free them up to continue to focus on other extremely important requirements. There are additional requirements towards the bottom of the slide on the left that we'll discuss during the upcoming legislative session. When we discussed Assembly Bill 422, one of the questions that was asked was, how many staff do you need to implement a top-down system so that it could potentially be added to the bill or discussed as an additional fiscal requirement? When we reached out to the other states who had recently transitioned, one of the things they said was, make an estimate as to the number of people you'll need, but just know that it will not be right even remotely. So what we asked and what was authorized was that we started this process recognizing that there's an implementation team that is made up primarily of contractors, and we'll talk to some of those positions. The hiring of contractors through the state procurement process has enabled us to identify not only the right people to implement the system, but also to identify those FTEs that we will need from a position-wise going forth. And again, those are the positions that we will likely discuss during the 2025 legislative session. So again, that along with a number of other important discussions that we had with other agencies across the state and other organizations across the country about how to do this right really helped save taxpayers quite a bit of money. So more specifically, what does it look like? I think is maybe the second question we get. So the process itself is 3 phases, and the first one is going to be modernized, and this is one where the voters are going to start to notice differences. Those of you that are voters in Clark County may actually not notice because the process began a couple years ago. When you go to the polls to vote in person, there's a new check-in kiosk. That new check-in kiosk has been implemented in Clark County already, and that will be standardized across the rest of the state. Not because it was used first in Clark, but rather because that is the company that ultimately is going to be used for the statewide top-down voter implementation. And the company itself is named Knowink, Knowink. They produce an election management system called Total Vote. That is going to be the standard election management system across our 17 counties and in use at the state for the first time. The check-in kiosks at a polling location are called poll pads. Again, their website, if you look at knowink.com, I believe it is, they have, again, demos and other links to show what these items will look like. There's also, in this initial modernization phase, a poll pad monitoring system called ePulse that will be used across the state. So if you can imagine, in Clark County, at the roughly 128 polling locations that Registrar Portillo has set up, each one of those has a number of check-in kiosks. ePulse is the system that allows her, from her office, to monitor in real time how many of those check-in kiosks are plugged in and charging appropriately, how many of them have lines because of the number of voters that are checking in. how many people have voted at each location so that she can right-size the needs of her staff to meet the electorate's needs. That will be not only in Clark, but uniform across the state so that the county election officials can truly address the needs of their voters in a fiscally responsible and timely manner. That's stage one, the modernization phase. Moving forward, there's going to be changes to the election portal for those for citizens when they go in to update or register to vote in the first place. And then finally, a centralization. I mentioned that Clark County is on a parallel process to implement theirs. Again, the needs of Clark with 1.3 million registered voters, approximately 70% of our electorate. That is also no small feat, and by Clark moving forth with their expert team to implement early, that has enabled the rest of the state to learn from their process. So we are truly grateful to them for that. But centralizing it, ultimately having everybody on the same database will in real time make it a big difference and really capture the essence of a lot of those benefits we discussed earlier. The project timeline, again, highlighting the 3 elections that we've talked about a little bit. Again, there's a 4th, potentially more, this calendar year. But again, it's of the utmost importance to move forward with this project in a timely and responsible manner. Again, there was an initial discussion point about, is it right to move forth before 2025? Frankly, the conditions changed. Secretary Aguilar has made this a priority and discussed it, of course, during the last legislative session. So the conditions are such that it does make sense and that we are able to do this. This is a project that we cannot get wrong, that has to be done right the first time, that we have to balance both the needs of the counties, their ability to execute the elections of this year during an important election year, along with their other statutory responsibilities, on top of things like cybersecurity. We continue to have briefings about the increases in domestic and foreign cyber threats, and making sure that we are mindful of that as we move forward on this project and do not cut any corners, absolutely not, that would endanger voter information. So it is not going to end either as we go through the calendar year. Again, very much intending to continue to learn, refine, develop training products and other things through the 2025 calendar year and even beyond. So I mentioned functionality, talked a little bit about the items that will be incorporated. But on slide 8 here, again, just to drive home that this is something that will be moving forth to the benefit of all using the no ink total vote solution. And again, eager to provide information about that if anybody has questions about what that solution looks like. Even going so far as if you're in Clark County, we can certainly ask the registrar if perhaps we could bring you by to see her system so you can see it in real time and how it benefits voters. We're also, again, some of the other elements that I want to highlight, GIS. We do not currently use GIS, but going forward we will, so that, when it comes to the identification of addresses for voter registration, it'll make districting considerably easier and help with the veracity and validity, rather, of the system, along with a number of other benefits. On slide 9, talking briefly to phases 2 and 3. Again, these are further in the future, but still very much on our mind. We as an organization try to think strategically. As the Secretary, I think, reminds me on at least a weekly basis to look deep and not focus on what the issue of today is. And to that end, we are thinking about phases 2 and 3 and how we can prepare the team, make sure that from a procurement standpoint, we are oriented and ready to implement from a cyber secure posture, while again addressing the needs of the elections we have in front of us. Talked about the voter information portal. There's also election night reporting. I will talk briefly about automatic voter registration and the increase in automatic voter registration agencies here in the next slide as well. But suffice to say that the transition directed by Assembly Bill 432 of the 2021 session is still very much on our minds. The last legislative session extended the deadline to January of 25, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Petition management, also again a very key but little known, I think, element of election management that our clerks and the state have too. So there's a petition module as well that we're looking at. I mentioned it a moment ago, but just to provide a little more clarity, when the bill was discussed and ultimately passed, we recognized that if we were going to increase the number of automatic voter registration agencies across the state while we were in a bottom-up system, it would require essentially 17 counties to work with their specific vendors while the state was working with a vendor to change things in the previous system. And then we would also change again as we transition to a top-down system. It was ultimately decided that that would not be an effective use of taxpayer money, and the recognition that getting everyone onto a statewide system first made sense, and then expanding automatic voter registration. So then instead of 17, but really 18 different APIs and other technical things to develop to meet the needs of all the different automatic voter registration agencies, now you have but one with that centralized system. So that the other voter registration agencies are able to connect to and provide the information as required in the bill. And again, that expansion very much still on the table, of course, obviously is directed by the statute and something that's coming up in the very near future. Interface migration, again, Assemblywoman highlighted it earlier with a question, but I was going to call it out too directly. When we talk about the interfaces and the gathering of data, I have, again, a history major originally, former military guy. I've learned more about data migration than I ever thought possible. So if you would like to hear about it, I can speak at length now about this process, as well as interface migrations and how to understand the needs of different agencies working together through state systems under the veil of cybersecurity. Those will include, but are not limited to, connecting with the DMV, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Electronic Registration Information Center, of course, so that we can continue to support or use that information to support our voter list maintenance efforts. The team and roles, again, I mentioned previously that primarily they are state contractors. We do have a handful of individuals, a number actually, and it's growing. Very proud about that. On the Elections Division staff that have county election experience, or even just multiple years at the state. But on top of that, recognizing that we have business subject matter experts, in other words, folks who understand elections and how elections function in our state, we are also marrying them up now with project management professionals and have been doing this as part of the project. So we have folks who understand project management, have vast experience using those principles in the non-government sector and the private sector to implement a number of major projects, and they're taking their skills and experience, bringing them over, asking key questions about how elections functions. We, of course, integrate our county election officials and their IT and staff as well to get the ground truth information, and then by bringing everybody to the table, establishing a series of committees and a structure that supports best practices, knowledge retention, knowledge transferal, as we have individuals coming and going. We are on track to go live on the 1st of April, which is, again, no small feat, and very much due to, as the Secretary mentioned, the individuals on our VREMS team at the counties and across the Elections Division working on this project to make sure that it over the period of really since last April when the contract was first signed, that we're moving in the right direction. From a programmatic approach, again, I mentioned, but also this is just really a reminder, project management, again, is a unique skill set that not every election official inherently has, especially when it comes to IT project implementation. So again, by bringing in the right folks and the right tools, tying in these key elements from training and testing, discussions about a mock election and those sorts of things to make sure developing a number of documents. Again, we in the elections team in the counties work on observation documents and requirements for security of ballots. There's a kind of an equal and parallel path of project documents that we have worked to refine and continue to grow to make sure the project is not only done properly but documented for state history as well and for analysis after the fact. Finally, and this is the last slide before the question slide, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least touch on finance. I know this is not a fiscal committee, but the bottom line here is that the Secretary, the staff, the counties, we are very mindful of the importance of preserving and taking care of tax dollars. We don't spend a single dollar frivolously. We track everything very meticulously to make sure that every tax dollar we expend towards this project is contributing to its success. And to that end, we provide, there was an interim finance committee report we've provided recently, and also are more than willing to discuss any element of the fiscal aspect of the project with any member or otherwise who's interested in how the project is going. That being said, please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy, and Deputy Woloshyn. Members, any questions for our Secretary of State and his deputies? I'm not seeing any here in Carson City. I'm here in Southern Nevada. Carson City, Senator Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the question's for the Secretary of State, and it's not exactly on this, although I think this will help address some of the concerns. But I guess the question is, and I think I've talked to you about this offline on various things before, is so we have this process, we have the election. I know there was discussion even today here at this meeting that people say, oh, they don't trust, the electoral process anymore. And to me, that's a fiction, right? Everybody trusted the electoral process until the last election, and one narcissistic gentleman just couldn't accept that he lost the fair, free, and open election. And we've even heard people repeat that today. So where is, when you're doing the processes and the canvassing boards, and you've heard in other states where people won't certify the election, and you have these constitutional crises, if you will, because you can't get the votes done, where's the ripcord on that so that the state can do this process? Now, some of the information on this, I think, will give you access to that county, whether they certify at the board or not. At least you'll have the information, report the results. But any ideas on how or where we might be able to go to make sure that all of those processes and the steps, if somebody wants to make mischief and throw a monkey wrench in so they can claim to say, see, I told you so, how do we try to fix that?
Thank you, Senator Daley. That's a great question, and that's one often I think about, but I think this is where government works. We have the legislative body, we have the executive branch, and we have the legal branch. We have the judicial. And I think all three have to work in parallel in understanding that, one, I'm being held accountable for doing the job that I'm statutorily required to do, but it's also, two, having the public have an opportunity to access the legal system to address any concerns or issues that they may have. We have dealt in that arena as well, and every time I think that builds transparency into the office even more, because I know it's an accountability system. But it's also coming before you as elected officials representing your elected communities to understand exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So I look forward to the continued cooperation among all three branches of government, but it's also to building this system so people can engage on their time and see how the process works.
Thank you very much, Secretary Aguilar. Any follow-up, Senator Daley?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. And I understand all three areas have to work in conjunction. You have the legislative, judicial, and the executive branch, and the legislature, as we're all familiar, establishes the policy. We create a budget for officers like yourself that's in the executive branch to carry out the policy. And the executive branch has a responsibility to faithfully execute the laws as they're prescribed and various things. But I'm talking about when you get to a board, right, that's a canvassing board that's appointed by county commissioners, or maybe it's the county commissioners, and they just are going to stifle this process. And we have strict timelines on when this stuff has to be done, especially when you get down to some of the nitty-gritty on these things, just because they didn't like the result. There's no other reason or various things. So what do we do? And I think back to what the process when we had the maps that were drawn by the legislature, I believe in 2011, vetoed twice by then Governor Sandoval, who turned out to be wrong, and as it turns out, but nevertheless. So then we had this crisis, and the ripcord there was the courts said, hey, we're going to appoint special masters. Is there something that maybe can be put into a statute that would allow of course, you have to have transparency, you have to give the people an opportunity to do that. But if they're in that executive branch and they're in that position and they're just stonewalling or refuse to do their duty, how do we get past that carefully so that people still have confidence and that it's not just we're ramming it down your throat type of a thing? But it seems to me there should be able to be some type of unbiased the third party that's going to look at it strictly objectively, not from that county, and say, here's the results, here all the information. There's no reason not to certify this.
Senator Daley, as a lawyer, I think, and in the election process, the Nevada Supreme Court actually certifies the election. They are the ones who certify. We deliver the information to them. They make that decision. But when you're saying it's being held up in a local level, again, I think that's responsibility of the Attorney General's office to represent our office to bring a challenge in that local jurisdiction. It's also making sure that we have individuals within the Attorney General's office who are well-versed in this area of law and can talk about these issues intelligently when they do come up or represent us in a significant way. I think that's a conversation that we need to have, and I think we are having it internally just from a management kind of not protection, but a management way. It's my responsibility as Secretary of State to represent all the voters across Nevada and making sure they have the equal representation, because I can tell you it's not a majority of Nevadans who hold the view that we wish some of our Nevadans didn't hold.
Thank you very much. Senator Daley, any follow-up?
No, that was it. I was just going to thank him for the answer, and I may follow up with him offline. So thank you.
Thank you. And one question I have, when the top-down system goes live, let's say we're going up to the primary election, and one of our constituents has been, let's say, registered Democrat for 20 years. They go to vote in their primary ballot, and somehow they come up as independent or nonpartisan. Would they, now with the top-down system, to try to correct that problem, would they contact their county clerk registrar, or would they contact the secretary's office regarding that issue?
It's a quick solution. There's same-day voter registration in Nevada, so they would have the opportunity. Obviously, we'll want to make sure that their voter registration is correct, and that's why with this top-down voter system, we hope that voters will look at the system, go into the system, and before any major election, make sure their information is up to date. A critical part of that information or that data for us is making sure we have contact information for that voter, so that if there is an issue with their ballot, we can directly contact them through telephone or through email.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And if I could follow up with our clerk registrar from Washoe County, just because you have experience in a state that had a top-down system, with issues, let's say there was an issue like that where a voter went to vote and there was an issue that they felt was incorrect regarding their, let's say, party affiliation. Was your experience in that state that it was a more simple process to try to clarify that and clear up that problem with the top-down system? Thank you.
Yes, Carrie Burgess with Washoe County. Yes, it is a little bit easier to do that with a top-down system because the state also has the same information that the county does. They can go to the state, or they can do like Deputy Voloshin just said, that they can go and do, Cisco just said that they can go and do a same-day registration. So same thing with where I came from, it is a lot easier, and having the top-down system, everybody has the same information so that they don't have to go just to the county, or they don't have to go just to the state. Because right now, if they went to the state doesn't have that information, they'd have to go to the county. Where in the future with the top-down system, they'll be able to go to either one.
Thank you very much, Registrar Burgess. And I believe we have a question on Zoom. Assemblywoman Dickman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I'm wondering, when you do this testing before you go live on April 1st, the mock elections or whatever validations, will there be any opportunities for the public or the press to observe some of this validation process?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. Gabriel DeCara for the record. That's an ongoing discussion. To be frank, that is going to be the mock election where we make sure that everything works, right? We have gotten a number of questions about this issue over the weekend, where folks were concerned because they perceived that the system was broken in some way, that their ballot had been miscounted, or had been counted when it should not have been, when none of that was the case. And this was, again, as the Secretary said, it was absolutely a mistake, but it was a relatively simple mistake. The mock election that we're going to be talking about doing, that's going to be a bunch of counties utilizing a new system for the first time. We don't expect that everything will happen perfectly. That's why you do a mock election before you go live. And we want counties and state staff to be able to feel comfortable to talk openly about problems that they're seeing, about questions that they're having. We absolutely want the public to be confident in the system, but that requires the state and the counties to have that level of comfort as well. So that being said, I think that we are open to different levels of observation, but we want to be careful because we want to allow the clerks and registrars and their staff and our staff to be able to deal with the problem or deal with the implementation, frankly. But Deputy Voloshin?
Thanks, Chief. And along those lines, Mark Voloshin for the record, Assemblywoman, the test. Two things I want to highlight. One is that it will be done only in the test environment, the mock election. So it will not, this is before the go live date, so this is not going to be using any live voter information. That's an important distinction I want to make. And then second, in keeping with what Chief Takara mentioned, these sorts of deliberate tests, especially in an IT system, are designed to test it. Like everyone across the state and the counties are going to be clicking and trying to break stuff as much as they possibly can and doing all these kind of out of the norm processes deliberately to figure out that if you hit Control P and then smack your computer, something happens. And because we want to identify that so that we can address it, because we have the Palomino Valley GID special election coming up in April, and that recall again will likely be using this system. And so we want to identify those kinks, address them as quickly as possible, and then make sure then when we get to the go live and the Palomino Valley special election, then we're not slapping and hitting Control P. Like we're doing things normally, it's functional as appropriate, but those issues will have been addressed by then.
Gabriel DeCara for the record, and just to add on to that, as Deputy Voloshin said, by law, the public and press are more than free to view, for example, the Palomino Valley special election. That may be an opportunity for folks to see the new system in process in a smaller environment. They can follow it step by step, and that is very much on the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, Chief Deputy. Any follow-up, Assemblywoman Dickman?
No, thank you.
Senator Sievers-Ganser, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, any questions on Zoom from members? Senator Sievers-Ganser.
Yes, I have. Thank you. So I wanted to go back to Senator Daley's question and then the response. So I appreciate the Secretary of State's office, the Secretary and his office working on updating the system and making sure that we continue to have a system that has high integrity, that's secure and has integrity. But there were some comments about the special masters, the Sandoval administration special masters being used. I also think that a nonpartisan redistricting committee, because they're two different subjects. One is processing the election, the other is redistricting. And I think we need to make sure that redistricting is also fair and that the voters have the opportunity to decide whether they want a nonpartisan redistricting commission. And I know this is a bit off topic, but it was brought up by Senator Daley, and I'm hoping that we will have that on the next ballot, because I would argue that redistricting, when you have a heavily weighted legislative body and the executive branch of the same party, you don't necessarily get a balanced redistricting process, and therefore I think it's fair that there's a third party, and I do think it was successful when there were special masters who were appointed by the courts to do the redistricting, 10 or so years ago. So I just wanted to add that comment. And again, I am grateful for the work that the Secretary is doing and his staff to make sure that we have a top-down system that serves the voters and it continues to have strong integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Seaver Scansert. And Assemblywoman Gonzalez, was there a question there? Did you have, I don't want to miss anyone on Zoom. But if none, all right, then if I could indulge one last question on the interface migration page, talk about ERIC interstate voter updates. And I know that ERIC got some press in the last year where some states were not joining into ERIC, and I don't know if you have that information as to how many states are part of the ERIC system right now, and in terms of trying to verify that someone's not registered to vote in Nevada and also in North Carolina. If you don't have that information, I don't want to put anyone on the spot. Maybe you could get that for us at a future date. But I wondered if you do have any updates as to where ERIC's at, and because I know that was an issue that had been brought up at past meetings as to how many states are part of ERIC and whether it really gives us a good picture as to making sure someone's not registering to vote here and then back in New York or North Carolina.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Volosh for the record. We will get you the information about the current ERIC membership. Discussions continue. I have frequent ERIC phone calls. Each state that is involved, the state election director, my role is a board member on ERIC. So full disclosure, I'm a board member of the organization simply because of my position working for Secretary Aguilar. The continuing discussions about expanding membership. As you highlighted, the more states that are part of the program, the more effective and clean our roles ultimately will be. There are some additional states, and I can get you that information as well to highlight the states that are considering, so that perhaps if you're interested in, or otherwise in discussion with those individuals about the process and pros and cons, that certainly could help. But we are firmly on board with ERIC, specifically because, as you highlighted, it supports clean voter rolls. That saves the state money, that ensures increased security and a number of other benefits to the program. And so we are also working actively to try to get other states as part of the process as well.
Gabriel DeCara for the record. I just want to add, as states do leave ERIC and as states have chosen not to participate with ERIC for one reason or another, there's an element of voter registration and cleaning up the voter rolls that I think is really important and is under-discussed, and that's personal responsibility. There are strict federal laws in place about when and how states and counties can clean up voter rolls to protect the right to vote of American citizens. That puts, there is an onus on those individuals who have changed, who have moved, et cetera. If they move to a different state, they're responsible for helping us clean up those rolls by updating their voter registration, by canceling their voter registration. And so while the new system will absolutely help with folks from county to county, and ERIC helps when folks move from member ERIC state to member ERIC state. Folks coming to and from non-ERIC states, the federal government sees it as their responsibility to assist with cleaning up the voter rolls. So there's a voter education aspect of this, and as much as possible, we want people to understand that they have an active part in this process. It is not just the state doing something to them or the counties, messing with their voter registration. Individuals have every reason to and every right to make sure that their own voter information is correct.
Mr. Chair, Cisco Aguilar.
Please go ahead, Secretary.
I am working in a bipartisan group of secretaries to ensure that we continue to expand the membership of ERIC. I think two states that are very critical to Nevada are California and New York. And so those are my goals, those are my vision for ERIC membership. Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work, Secretary, and thank you. I think through the years, I think that's always been the concern, that we really like the ERIC system, but we need more states to join, and anything you can do to get more states to join, I appreciate all your efforts. I think it, like I said, make sure our rolls are clean. Members, any additional questions? Carson City, Zoom. Okay, with that, we'll close agenda item number 6. And I would like to move on to agenda item number 7. We do have representatives from the Department of Motor Vehicles to update us. We have Thomas Martin and Sean Sever here to update us on automatic voter registration process at our Nevada DMV. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you again to our Secretary, your Chief Deputy, your Deputy, and all our registrars who provided so much valuable information today.
Hello, Mr. Chair, committee members, Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. It is good to see you, and I hope you all are doing well. The DMV is happy to present an update to you today on our automatic voter registration process. I have a couple of subject matter experts on AVR with me online. Thomas Martin is from our Research and Project Management Division, who will open up with a briefing on how AVR works at the DMV and how it was set up. Nikki Dabe from our Field Services Division, who will give you an idea of what AVR looks like every day in our DMV offices and share some of the challenges we face with it. And then Serena Gallegos is also in her office. She's the administrator of our Field Services Division, and she's also around to help answer any questions we receive at the end. So without further ado, Mr. Martin.
All right, thank you, Sean. For the record, my name is Thomas Martin, and as Sean said, I am with the Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles in our Research and Project Management Division. Before I get into kind of a high level of our current process, I don't want to echo too much of what has already been said from the deputy secretaries and the secretary to kind of speak to why we do what we do as far as voter registration in Nevada, but more specifically to the DMV. We have the NVRA, which is the National Voter Registration Act. That's basically the federal law that dictates that the Department of Motor Vehicles, when they're doing driver's license or ID card transactions as part of our normal business, those applications that are filled out essentially also serve as a voter registration application. So that's the higher level of dictating what it is that we do. As far as the automatic voter registration components, that was from back in the 2019 session that really made it a state-specific function where those applications that serve as voter registration applications and driver's license applications, we had to figure out a way to implement to where when a customer comes in and it's a mutual customer for voter registration and motor vehicle business, that we were able to make it as seamless as possible for the customer. So with the federal level and the state requirements, we were able to kind of streamline that to make it one form, and it was basically a simple flow. As for the current process that was put in place, and I'll speak to kind of just the high level and why we did the things the way we did. I will say right out the gate, it was known right from the start that this was going to add time to each transaction. There was going to be instances where confusion may kick in, and we're having to stop business to kind of handle questions and stuff like that. So we were able to get through a lot of that, and I'll let Ms. Dave speak to that because she is our expert for those specific instances. But for the high level of the current process, essentially, when a customer comes into our office, they fill out the driver's license or ID card application, and within that, we specify to the customer that this information is also being used for automatic voter registration purposes. And there is a point in time where once you get closer to the end of a transaction, there's more information on the voter registration process and how to either opt out, select a party preference, and whatever the preferences of that applicant. Once a DMV technician calls a customer to the window and they're inputting that information into the system, that's the information we use. It's a shell of information that once we process that application, it goes into our system. We then input the values that the customer provides to us. They're always blank responses until we have an application. But the first one is, are you a U.S. citizen? And then, will you be 18 on or before the date of the election? There's also some filtering requirements, which is what we call it. And those are systematic filters that essentially, based on the responses provided on that driver's license application, that will determine when and if an applicant is actually eligible for the automatic voter registration process. So, for example, based on a specific credential type. So we have a driver authorization card that we issue. If that is the selected card type, that is a record that will be omitted and filtered out of the automatic voter registration process. If certain documents as far as proof of name and date of birth and that are not indicative of U.S. citizenship are selected in our system, that's another filtering component. So that'll also remove those records from the automatic voter registration process. And then once all that information is entered into the system, it really boils down to it's a queued up record. It's not transmitted right there on the spot. We do use an interface between us and the Secretary of State's the Nevada Online Voter Assistance interface, the NOVA interface, that will send the information to the applicable counties based on the physical address that is put into our system based on the customer's preference. Excuse me. Once that record is queued up in our system and that NOVA is holding on to that record, we will basically amend that record with, and Nikki will kind of get into this process a little bit of how they process forms and what happens, but we will amend based on opt-out preferences, their party preference, and there's a form that comes out at the end of the transaction that's provided to the customer that Nikki will kind of speak to. And then we do confirmation receipts, and we'll also take the opportunity to, during the transaction, provide a confirmation page that will actually help the customer confirm everything and make sure we've put the information in right. And that's really just a checks and balance to make sure we are in data entry is correct and we're doing it the way we need to do on our end. So that's just, like I said, it's a high level overview of the current process, and I'll pass it to Ms. Dave to speak to our field services side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Sever. Good morning. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Thomas. Nikki Dade for the record. I am the training manager with the Field Services Division of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I am also the automatic voter registration coordinator for the Department of Motor Vehicles. To kind of touch on the customer experience for the automatic voter registration and the technician experience, as Thomas stated, there is the process. So on the application, the customer is going to answer the 2 questions that will either filter the applicant out. So depending on how the customer answers those questions, that is going to determine whether or not the customer will get that options form that Thomas had spoke to earlier. That options form, the customer will go ahead and take that with them, and the customer can either do nothing with that form and take it with them. If the customer chooses to do nothing with that form, then there will be no update sent to the county. So if they are currently registered to vote, then their voter information will remain the same. If they are not currently registered to vote, then of course they will be opted in to vote and registered as nonpartisan. They can choose to register and choose their party at that time, or they can choose to opt out. What will happen is, depending on whether or not they choose their party or choose to opt out, we have what we call a red box in each of our offices. The customer will then put the form in a red box, which is a secured box and locked. Each office has to assign a technician for the day to this red box. So each technician is, when they are assigned to this box, they are tasked with getting off the window or being pulled off of the window anywhere from 3 to 10 times a day to pull these forms out of the red box. What they will do is they will take these options forms and they will locate the driver's license work that goes with these options forms for the customers. They will match them up with the customer's work and marry them together. They will then take the options forms and enter them into the driver's license record for the customer based off of the customer's options. And then once they're entered into the customer's record, they go and get scanned into our system. And then, as Thomas touched on earlier, they are put into a queue and then transmitted to the clerk's offices later on. So what happens then is, if the customer forgets to enter in or put their form into the red box, sometimes the customer will return at a later date and submit the form at a later date. And even though their information may have been transmitted at a later time, I will then get notified by each of the offices that this customer had submitted their form at a later date. And in that case, I then notify the Secretary of State's office that this customer had submitted their form. And depending on what the customer chose based off of their form, I will submit that information to the Secretary of State's office, and then they will submit that information to the county clerk's office. The technicians, like I said, they're pulled off of these windows, and the staff, they are required to go through training every 6 months for voter registration training. They are required to.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. They are required to take this training so that we can maintain integrity of our records and to continue to stay consistent within our processes. Our staff, our managers, they choose staff that are able to find efficiencies in the process so that our technicians are not off windows and holding up our wait times in processing our customers. However, there is still that lull in our transaction time because our technicians are off the windows because of this red box process. So with that, I will turn it back to Thomas.
Thank you, Ms. Dade. And Mr. Thomas, any additional comments you'd like to make, or should I open up to questions now?
I would actually, and Thomas Martin for the record, Nevada DMV. Just want to kind of encapsulate everything Ms. Dave just presented, and the fact that although we knew AVR was going to really add some time to transactions, we touched records multiple times, which has created quite a few inefficiencies with our business. I think we're all aware here that the DMV is currently undergoing a full transformation effort to try and find ways to make our business better, more streamlined, more efficient, maybe even put more transactions online. But one of the things that happens is we face the challenges of the red box that Ms. Dave had alluded to. That red box is kind of the bane of the existence for the AVR process for the DMV, because that is where AVR transactions really, that's the middleman for the transaction. So we start it in our computer system, a form prints out, then it has to go to that red box for us to do any other updates to that record. So like it was mentioned, if the customer doesn't do that, really their preferences aren't being captured. And because it's automatic voter registration, it is a daily transmission that's from us to the Secretary of State and the applicable counties, that it really impacts the customer in the long run when it's all said and done. As far as I forgot it, left it in my car, come back the next day, and it's too late. Like Nikki says, she has to go through and actually contact Secretary of State. They have to update the records. Now it's causing an additional burden on the counties. The last thing I just want to add is, and Deputy Secretary Voloshin mentioned it earlier, Assembly Bill 432 from the 21 session is actually a very important bill. I think it's a mutual bill for not just Secretary of State, counties, but the DMV as well. There's an ability there for the DMV to really kind of align that legislation as well as our efforts for transforming our whole world inside the DMV by removing the red box, allowing us to process transactions. We can still be that voter registration agency and provide the information to the Secretary of State, but it's in more of a raw format. Here's the name, the information, the last four of the social, all the information that we provide to the county clerk through the NOVA transmission. We would still provide that, but we don't get involved with it. Do they want to opt out? Do they want to make a party, or did they forget to do it? What happens next? So as the Deputy Secretary mentioned earlier, that was pushed out to a 1/1/25 implementation, and we have a great partnership with the Secretary of State and the counties to work towards making that happen and make sure it's a collaborative effort, and we're not 11th hour trying to get everything settled right then and there. We've already started the conversations of how can we make that happen. So Just wanted to close with that there's streamlined ways to make this work for everybody, and we're looking forward to that conversation later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, and thank you, Ms. Dade. Members, any questions for our representatives from the Department of Motor Vehicles? Up in Carson City or on Zoom, Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for telling us a little about this process. But I've had contact from, let's just say, more than one constituent who has told me that after they've had interactions with the DMV, renewing a driver's license or something like that, they find that their registration has been switched from a party to nonpartisan. So it sounds like from what you're saying today that that's not even possible. It would have to be something that they did. Is that right?
Thomas Martin for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. So it is possible, and it's actually, let me clarify. It's no longer possible.
Okay.
It was possible at one point, so if I think I know what you're speaking to, that this was an issue that was a couple years ago, where there was a little glitch in our online portal where transactions are being done online, and certain transactions done in office. There was a glitch in the system that basically, if the transaction was done, so our in-office transactions were built to do, like Ms. Dave mentioned earlier, if the customer does nothing at all, we're still going to pass information. We pass it as customer left blank, and it defaults to nonpartisan on the actual registration side at the county. Well, our online portal was built slightly different, from customer left blank to nonpartisan. So it was actually, instead of it defaulting on the county side, it was defaulting on our side. So the way it's meant to work and how it's working today and has been corrected as of a couple years ago when this was brought to our attention, how it works now is if that AVR options form is not put in the red box, then we will transmit the information with customer left blank, and then that is the queue to the county side, whether if they're not currently registered, they'll be registered as nonpartisan. If they are currently registered, customer left blank equals don't touch their party preference. Or we will transmit the party preference selected on that form, and then that's what we'll change it to if it's a change on their side. But we don't change it on our end, we just input the value.
Oh, good. That's good to know, so I can explain. And then one more quick thing, if I could. You said it depends on how people fill out the application, whether or not they get the voter form. So if someone's not truthful on that application, is there a way to catch that? Do they have to prove it, or?
So there's no way for us to catch it unless they provide documentation that does not align with the responses provided on the form. So that a good example of that is if one of the filtering components is the citizenship question. If they provide documentation that is not indicative of U.S. citizenship, but yet they answer yes on the citizenship form, then we can ask that question. However, those are self-attestation questions, essentially. So there were protections put in place with the automatic voter registration process that if some happen to get through because maybe they didn't understand the question, maybe they didn't understand the clarification we were requesting, there may be the onesie-twosies that do slip through, and then those protections are in place that as long as they don't intend to act upon that registration that was done incorrectly, then it's a no harm, no foul, and then it'll get cleaned up. If we catch it on our end at a later date, Nikki is responsible for notifying the Secretary of State to the county through the Secretary of State of, hey, this was one that was not done correctly, or whatever the information change needs to be on the county side.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thanks again, Shay.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any follow-up, Assemblywoman Dickman?
I think I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members on Zoom with questions? At Carson City? We'll come back to Sawyer Building, Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank you all for your work really to ensure that we have the right to vote in Nevada, so thank you for that. And Michael, you answered my first question, which was going to be, is the top-down system going to help you all? So that's great to hear and on the record. My other question would be, now that this law has been in place for a couple years, are you finding that people are expecting this now? Are people surprised still that they can automatically register at the DMV? Just what's happening on the ground, if you could share with us.
Thomas Martin for the record. I will speak to one of the things that I think we've noticed as far as on the administrative side of the program, the AVR program at the DMV, is our driver's licenses and ID cards. They average 4+ years on how long they're valid for. So it hasn't really been out long enough to see repeat customers where it just feels like second nature to them. Like I did my my driver's license, I think right after it rolled out, and of course I work here, so I'm expecting it, but I won't see the DMV again for business side until 2029. So it's kind of a hard answer to question there, or question answer there. If I could pass it to Ms. Dave to kind of speak to the in-office and maybe the public perception of the reaction to the NAVR process. So if Nikki or Serena wants to chime in on that.
Hi, I'm Serena Gallegos, Field Services DMV Administrator. So to answer your question, when new residents come into the state and they, see that they can get a driver's license or an ID or whatever they're getting for the day, in addition to being able to register to vote, they're content with that. And then they are surprised, especially some of the new residents coming into the state. So that I do know of. But to what Thomas, his point and what he said, I think it's too soon to kind of have any repeat customers just as of yet, but I will speak on the new residents. They're happy to have to kind of come and do both, getting their credentials and getting to register, or getting to be able to register vote in the state of Nevada.
Thank you very much, and appreciate all your hard work at the Department of Motor Vehicles trying to help people get registered to vote. Assemblywoman Mosca, any follow-up? Members, any additional questions? Don't want to miss anyone. All right, with that, we will close agenda item number 7, and we'll move on to our agenda item number 8, public comment. Again, here we can take public comment here in Las Vegas at the Sawyer Building, up in Carson City, the Legislative Building, and via phone. So here at Sawyer Building, I don't see anyone coming up, but please feel free if you wish. Up in Carson City, I see someone at the dais, so please go ahead, and we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes per speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Scott Hohen, Carson City Clerk Recorder. Just want to make a couple of comments about the VREM system. The clerks have a weekly call with one another, and we have continually had conversations about this, and I'm not going to make everything sound rosy and great. There is apprehension going to a new system, especially when we're having to run the presidential preference primary, and right now not even finishing it and getting ready for June. Our calendar looks like this. Today, this afternoon, the Secretary of State is having a training session with our team on how to use the poll books. And this is the first time that we're really getting our hands on the poll books to learn it. So that's today, February 22nd. February 11th and 12th is when we're going to do this mock election. So we have, a couple of weeks to really get our hands around the new technology. Then March 25th, we're going to transfer all of our current data with all of the images and applications and signature files to this new system to be ready to go on April 1st. Then we have to train our election workers in terms of how to use brand new technology and systems. It's not going to be an easy one, but the clerks expect perfect execution. I mean, we have to be perfect. We have to be right. We can't make mistakes. So I want to make that clear that there is some apprehension going through the issue. VREMS is only a part of the conversation. We connect to all of our election equipment. Our ballot marking, we print out the ballots. We're actually testing today the connectivity between our poll pads and the printers that print the actual ballot card, that puts it into the ballot marketing device, that gets it tabulated. That's a completely different vendor and system that we manage to tabulate election results. So this is the minimum viable product for us to go through and implement from a voter registration point of view. But you also need to know that there's an increased expense to the county. I can see it coming. I know it. I think the state hopefully will pick up some of the expenses, but it is a more expensive system from a licensing point of view. And
Mr. Hohen, I apologize. We are at 2 minutes. I'm just trying to be fair to everyone. I appreciate your comments and all your hard work. But if you could just close, we sure appreciate it. Thank you.
No, I'm
We're happy to take
finished.
any additional comments in writing.
Yeah,
too,
I'm finished.
If
Thanks
you'd
a
like
lot.
to submit any additional.
Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else in Carson City wishes to make public comment? Okay, not seeing anyone and not seeing anyone here in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the phone lines that wishes to make public comment?
Yes, Chair. If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. Could you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Orenshaw and the members of the committee. This is Dora Martinez. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Secretary of State, especially great big thanks and appreciation to Mark Palacian, who has really stepped up and make sure that voting in Nevada is accessible and secured. I am a blind person that brought people with disability to vote, and he is the who are you going to call when nothing works, and Mark Palacian is the person to call, and he made sure that all voting in Nevada are accessible, and including people who are ASL users. So thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Broadcasting, is there any other public comment on the phone lines?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Oscar Williams here, sir, again. To restore public confidence and integrity in Nevada's election, Cisco Aguilar must resign. And he needs to take his chief deputy with him. And I'll tell you why. He just lectured us on misinformation while engaging in misinformation. The hand count study that he referenced is old and stale, and it's not applicable, and it's been replaced by Mark Camp's work. And then he went on, and he doubled down, and he gaslighted us with the safest, best elections in the nation thingy, and in the process seemed to ignore the plethora of evidence from around the country that suggests that some of these election systems have grave problems. He's suggesting that we are somehow magically immune in Nevada. I will give you a lifeline, gentlemen. Prove to me that our systems are not afflicted by the same problems that we see from around the country. Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, all over the place. There's malware that survives logic and accuracy testing. There's QR codes.
And Mr. Williams, I'm happy to have you make your public comment, but I will not tolerate any personal attacks on anyone. I'm happy to have you express your opinion, but I will not tolerate any personal attacks on anyone.
Okay. All right. Let me make one more point then, all right? I apologize. Is it not true that hand counting is bulletproof against cyber attack? And is it not true that hand counting is bulletproof against malware? And as far as I know, hand counting is cost effective and it creates shovel-ready jobs. The insinuation that hand counting is bad and the equipment is better and all that, that's rather gratuitous, and I disagree. Thank you for your time, sir. That's my comment.
Thank you. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the phone lines that wishes to make public comment?
Yes, Chair. There is one more caller. Caller with the last three numbers, 888. You're unmuted on our end, and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 888. Would you please unmute your phone? You are unmuted on our end. Chair, it appears this caller is having trouble connecting. Would you like me to move on to the next caller?
Yes, broadcasting. And if that caller would like to try to call back in, the phone number is 888-475-4499. The meeting ID is 881-0730-8495. And then you press pound after the meeting ID. But please go ahead, broadcasting.
My name is Ellen Gifford. I don't know if the Secretary of State has left the meeting, but I provide training to voters who wish to observe the elections. We study Nevada's election statutes and regulations so that the voters know what Nevada's laws say the process is supposed to look like. Based upon the presentation the Secretary of State has given today, the process will no longer look the same in the fast-approaching elections. Will there be time to properly amend the statutes and regulations in time for these elections? In Nevada, the statutes and regulations are not codified in a timely manner. Where will a person be able to access the information needed for proper training of election observers? I'd appreciate an answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giffords. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the line who wishes to make public comment?
If you have recently joined and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. One moment, Chair. Caller with the last 3 numbers, 888, you are unmuted and may begin.
Hello, my name is Janice Hermson, and I had a prepared statement, but after listening to the meeting, I decided that I would rather just make some comments. I'd like to comment on the fact that you talked about trends in mail-ins, and I believe it was a false narrative. This election was for candidates that were pretty much known who was going to win in those, and so people were not as inclined to attend it. In addition, there was a caucus for the Republican Party, so there were a lot of people that maybe didn't even go. So to say that mail-ins was the predominant, I think is pretty inaccurate. Had the state made it clear that the different options available to voters included a caucus, we might have had a better time of it. The reason that many of us are spending so much time, for which we don't get paid, analyzing what's going on in the elections is because trust has eroded in the election process. I know that in my written statement I addressed why that trust has eroded, and it was not because of who won or lost. And so I hope you will read my statement and see why that was. I also look forward to reading the, quote, boring report about the glitch that happened this weekend. And I thank you for listening to my statement.
Thank you for your comments, and we did not receive any statements, so if you would please submit that to committee staff. Thank you. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the phone lines who wishes to make public comment?
Chair, there are no other callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you, and I'll come back up here to the Sawyer Building. Chief Deputy DeGuerra.
Thank you very much, Senator Orenshaw. Gabriel DeCara for the record. Just a few quick things. There are some necessary changes to regulations to ensure that everything goes smoothly for this election. Deputy Secretary for Elections Mark Volashin has already had 2 hearings on those regulations, and they will be presented to the Legislative Commission next week, where we hope that they will be approved. Furthermore, again, as the Secretary said earlier, and would like me to say again, Nevada's elections have always been secure, fair, and accessible. At no point are voting machines connected to the internet. There is a wide variety of certification and security processes that I have become very familiar with over the last year to ensure that elections remain secure here in Nevada. And a machine counting hundreds of thousands of ballots is more accurate than a person attempting to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Deputy. Appreciate your comments. Any other public comment in Carson City? Anyone who didn't get a chance to speak, who wants to speak? With that, members, I believe we now completed our second period of public comment, and we'll see everyone at our next meeting on March the 22nd. Again, thank everyone for their attention, their good questions. I want to thank the representatives from the Secretary of State's office, our county clerks, registrars, the Department of Motor Vehicles, everyone who presented, the public who took part in this meeting. And again, we do appreciate everyone's hard work in making our election system work. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Great meeting. Lots of great information.
Bye. Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye. Thank you.